Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Greg Hiebert and Dennis O'Neill, who are partners at leadershipForward and authors of the best-selling book, Changing Altitude. Greg and Dennis, welcome to the program.
Thank you. What a privilege to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to talking with you, learning from you, because every single interaction on personal, professional, podcast, whatever you call it, is an opportunity to learn. And I love the title, Changing Altitude, because I wonder, I've not read it. This is the first time I'm hearing about your book, but I bet you that it has some elements and aspects to when you change your attitude, you can change your altitude. So let's jump into all of those kind of great things, but give us a little bit of background on you guys' entrepreneurial journey, and then what made you sit up one day and go, you know what, we need to write a book called Changing Altitude.
Sure. This is Dennis. I'll actually take the second part of that first, why we wrote the book. One of our clients out of Chicago was promoted, and he ran one business unit and about 250 people, about $100 million a year. And then his parent company promoted him almost overnight to run 6 business units and 2,500 employees.
Oh.
And so as we were coaching, he just asked Greg and I, what's out there to help me make this leap? It's just such a significant requirement and a skill set change. And Greg and I did a tremendous amount of research in terms of trying to find what the right article or book or what was out there to help him. And, we found about 15,000 books on leadership. And I'll say 7,500 of them were about how to be a great CEO.
Yep.
And 7,500 of them were about your first leadership job. But there was just almost nothing in the literature to help somebody in the transition periods.
Yeah.
So the example I give is you have a great emergency room physician, and they get promoted to be head of the emergency department because they have their thumb on everything. They're the subject matter expert. They know that job well. Well, then that person gets promoted to an administrative role, and they've never had to deal with profit and loss statements or contracting or working with unions and all the things that go in to taking over a role where you're no longer the absolute expert, but you're promoted because of your potential, yet there's a new skill set that's required. So Greg and I both have military backgrounds. I'll talk about mine. You can talk about his. But I spent 21 years in the Army, first as an armor officer and then later as an Army strategist. I also had the opportunity to teach at 3 universities and pick up a doctorate from Duke University on the way, and just always loved teaching. After I retired, I went to the corporate world to a large manufacturing firm and did that for a couple years. And then when I left there, Greg had been a dear friend and mentor of mine for 31 years. And he said, why don't you come back to your passion of leadership development and organizational excellence and developing high potential teams? So he brought me into his firm, leadershipForward, and that's where I've been ever since. And then that culminated in finding this niche that was needed and writing the book, Changing Altitude, together.
Well, let me just pause right there before Greg gives his little intro background and make a comment, because one of the points, I've got your book pulled up here on Amazon, and I want to start off when we talk about the book about this one headline point that says, humility is the foundation for self-awareness. Well, just observing what you just said there, Dennis, you used the word something to the effect of, oh, you know what, along the way I picked up a PhD. I'm not, like bow down to me because now I'm a doctorate of. You're just like, I just picked it up. So I think that it's so neat when you observe someone that walks the talk and they're exhibiting that humility, like what you're teaching in the book. So I want to put a pin in that. We can go deeper when we jump into the book and humility as the foundation for self-awareness.
Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll just build on that. And matter of fact, if there's a subtext for this book, it's the power of and the underestimation of how important humility is. And so that's why we love the title Changing Altitude, because it's a very simple metaphor, certainly aviation metaphor, but also a metaphor for human beings to make sure that when they need to go high, to understand the context and the environmental factors affecting what they have to do. They also need to go low and to get into the weeds, not to micromanage and tell people what to do, but more importantly, to understand the context as vivid and concretely as possible, and to build the kind of relationships you need so that when you do make decisions, you've got buy-in, a commitment to those decisions, and you're not going alone. And so changing altitude is having the courage to even admit you don't know, and to willing to accept that there's a lot of things that get you in trouble, but the ones that will get you in more trouble, the things you don't know. So I had the privilege, like Dennis, to graduate from the United States Military Academy. I spent the first 2 assignments in the 82nd Airborne Division, and then got selected to teach leadership at West Point, and probably found the job that I look back on with the greatest joy and sense of fulfillment. And then left the military and joined McKinsey and Company. Along the way, West Point had been kind enough to suggest that I go to the Harvard Business School, and very proud that I got in there, and it was a transformative experience. And then in 1993, I left the military in my experience at the McKinsey, and up until 2001 had this dream and vision of wanting to start a leadership development company where I could spend the rest of my life helping young as well as experienced leaders lead from a place of greater compassion, greater humility, greater clarity, greater intention, and greater purpose.
That is well said. And one of the other thoughts that comes to my mind when we're talking about altitude is that quote, or that word picture that, when you're facing adversity in life or business and winds are against you, remember that airplanes take off in the face of wind. That's what gives them the lift. And so I think that's a really neat analogy to keep in mind that, hey, when things are going just really smooth, maybe you need to look around and go, what's coming, or what needs to be, tweaked in, because something's happening. And I think that's a really great thing for when you're doing your coaching for leaders. So what are some of the things when you first begin an engagement with a firm that you are working with them and teaching them in their organization?
So it starts really with the individual or the team. So we get brought in either to coach high performance teams and help them accelerate their growth, or to help individuals in the same way. And frankly, usually it's both. We work with intact leadership teams, but also with individuals. And as we start, we oftentimes use different assessments and tools to include a 360-degree review, which provides feedback from peers, subordinates, and superiors alike to give an honest assessment, as well as some personality work in terms of, what are my behavioral tendencies that I need to be most aware of. And putting those 2 types of instruments together usually really sets a great roadmap to help people accelerate. So I always say, I don't think I do anything that people can't do on their own. The return or the value added is to help them do it bigger, faster, and stronger, and to use that as an opportunity for growth, not only as an individual in the workplace, but oftentimes it overlaps into a tremendous amount of satisfaction and feedback in their personal life. Yeah, I'm just thinking about one individual COO that I coach, and after a week, I came back, and the response from his wife was actually, "I'm not sure what you're doing differently, but I just need you to keep it up."
That's awesome.
But it was in that approach, it was all about gratitude.
Oh, wow, yeah. So you were finding, and this should be obvious, but it's neat to recognize, when you are working on and polishing up and improving the professional side of your life, maybe there's some trickle down to your personal side of life.
Not just a trickle down of
a pour down.
Huge ripples. Yes,
Wow.
one of my points that I make in my teaching and my coaching is that we should make it easy for the people who work with us.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, there's tremendous research that said that the highest performing teams are not because of the brilliance of each individual member, but the behavioral expectations we set and we hold each other accountable for. And the higher we can hold each other accountable for those behaviors and treat each other with kindness, communicate with opportunities to say, hey, I didn't really understand you. Can you say that again? And instead of being angry or intense, just gratefulness. And so one of our beliefs that echoes through this book is that life is a team sport, that nothing important in life, whether that be with your family or whether that be with the business you lead, is done by yourself. And the illusion that sometimes gets painted of the rugged individual, it doesn't capture that everything hard, to include the creation of America, was through the collective efforts and hard perseverance by the team. One of the greatest stories ever told is undaunted courage of the Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery journey in 1802 to Oregon and back without a map.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this book gives a roadmap for how leaders can get clarity of where are their strengths, where are their opportunities for growth, how to build a team where you're working with your differences as opposed to letting those differences divide you, and assembling a team that honors treating each other with immense respect, trust, and this term called psychological safety.
Yeah. When you're mentioning those things, it makes me think of a question that if you were to extract out every single bullet point of benefit you bring to your organization, it would probably be pages and pages and pages of bullet points. So I would venture to say that you too, from the outside looking into an organization, have the 30,000-foot perspective of guiding them. Wonderful, we get that. But I think that sometimes an organization or a leader is, too close to the forest to see the trees. So what would you say are some of the indicators that they would go, "Oop, you know what? That right there could be something that, maybe Greg and Dennis could help us with." So what are some of those things that would be the low-hanging fruit that would be, we'll start there, and then, of course, we'll move on to other things, but what are some of the bigger things that you watch for to focus on?
Yeah, so a couple things come to mind really quickly, and that's with the metaphor of changing altitude, and that is, when do we need to operate at the 30 or 40,000 foot level, and when do we need to take it down to the more tactical approach? I like to challenge leaders all the time by asking the question, are you spending your time doing the things that only you can do? Yeah. And if they can answer that honestly, yes, then they're probably operating at a pretty good altitude. But that also requires the opportunity to come down off the balcony sometimes and look from the ground up. I'll say, lay on your back and look up and look at the allocation of resources and the priorities we set. And do people understand what that critical vision is and how we have defined success? I find a lot of organizations that are rowing in a boat and everybody's working really, really hard, but they don't truly have a common understanding of the destination of where we're headed. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the communication between teams, you asked for an indicator. Well, do the difficult, hard conversations take place in the boardroom with all of the leaders of the team present, or do they walk out and actually have the difficult conversations when two people go get coffee? Okay. And as you mentioned, that level of trust and respect and psychological safety, if those are present, then difficult conversations can be had where people can honestly give their opinion. And we know that the best teams operate when they have a positive feeling. And we can look at assuming positive intent. And we have an obligation to dissent when we don't agree with what is being said. But all too often we see that, people nod their head up and down, but inwardly they're saying, wow, this isn't a great idea, or I just don't agree, but, I don't have a place on the team where I can speak up. And therefore, the indicator is, I'll call it the water cooler. So when you walk out of it and, you walk over to the water cooler, the true conversation takes place.
And I think that if you can be watching for that, whispers and hushed tones, or maybe if you got the word out to the organization that, hey, we would love anonymous feedback. So we have set up a purely anonymous, online Dropbox where no one knows who sent what, but please, give us your grievances, per se. If you start seeing those things fill up, then okay, now there's some things that might be, broken or could be improved on. So I think that's a really good indicator. What else? What are some of the other things that you're teaching in your book and see organizations have need of?
Yeah, I think one of the most important foundational elements for a high-performing organization and team is the creation of an environment of psychological safety. Denny pointed out with this, creating a norm around having an obligation to dissent, but it's even richer than that. It's the leadership culture is one that believes some of the best ideas, some of the best thinking is in the heads and the hearts of the people doing the work. And that one of the, why changing altitude is an appropriate metaphor is, we think that the fundamental task of the leader is to make sure he or she has as much understanding of what is in the heads and the hearts of the people that they lead, and to fully appreciate what they're struggling with. One of the issues in our society that makes it hard for working mothers is how the cost of daycare. And I think that's just one of many, many issues that sometimes, sitting in our offices, we may lose sight of because we're not having to deal with that issue every day. So leaders getting line of sight to, what are those barriers? What are those difficult things our employees are wrestling with? And how can we find ways to create more flexibility so that we can give more of what they need so that they can be unbelievably productive at work and offer their best ideas, and we create a place where, those ideas, that doesn't mean we act on them, but we create a place where those ideas are valued and respected. And my view is, I think that the other task of leadership is to try to do everything we can to make sure the people doing the work have the understanding of why. What is incredibly frustrating is leaders will spend months and months wrestling with a big decision. And then when they all come to a decision of what they're going to do, they expect everybody to execute it within days.
Yeah, they've spent months with it, but they expect everyone to turn on a dime.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's do this, guys. Let's wrap up with this thought. When you've been working with companies for many, many years, and the book is a culmination of your teachings, but can you think of an example without mentioning names or companies or anything specific, personal details, but what has been something that was either surprising in a positive way, or just like a outworking of your work with the organization that, like I alluded to and we spoke of earlier, you can work on the professional side, but hey, the personal side really just had that not trickle down, but really flow through. Can you think of an example where someone's come back to you and said, hey, your work with us has been spectacular? Let me just tell you this.
Dennis, can I take this one?
Of course.
All right. Yeah, so yesterday I got a note from an executive that we haven't communicated in quite some number of years, and she had already read the book.
Oh, neat.
She got an advanced copy and read it, and she says, hey, in this chapter you mentioned this name. I'm pretty sure, Greg, that name was really the CEO that we work for. You don't have to tell me if that's true.
Yeah.
But she says, and she pointed out that the difference we made. So just to give you a highlight, in the book it's spoke about that he had to get a 360, and the chief nursing officer who reported to him, before I went into his office to give him his 360, she held my hands and she said, I know what I put in there. I'm praying for you.
Wow.
And I was intimidated and terrified because this man was about 6'5". And to his credit, he owned those results that said he created an intimidating workplace for his team. He owned them, and his challenge to me is, we've got a lot of work to do, don't we? Let's get to it. And to his credit, he stepped up with courage. He changed altitude, and to her point yesterday, she says, you guys deserve a lot of credit. He changed and he made that place a better place because
and
of that.
All of those actors in that little scene you just described are had to have been engaged. So, for instance, you guys had to bring your A game. That CEO had to recognize and be willing to change and adapt and recognize that, ouch, that might hurt just a tad, but, deep down in my heart of hearts, I don't mean to be this way, that way, whatever this 360 is bringing out, but guide me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. I will, follow what you say. So yes, good. And then here's this employee that years later reported back to you guys that it was real and it was lasting and it wasn't just a flash in the pan. That's spectacular. Well, gentlemen, it's we probably touched on bullet point 1/2 of the first bullet point. We could talk for probably 19 more hours without taking a breath, but we need to wrap it up at some point. So what's the best way that someone could reach out, connect with your firm, learn more about what you do, and also pick up a copy of the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So www.leadershipforward.com is our firm website, and there's a link to the book there, as well as Amazon website. So book came out yesterday, and I'm pleased to announce that it hit their bestseller list already today in 24 hours. So it's a Changing Altitude book. If you just look that up on Amazon, it's very easy to pick up.
Awesome. Well, Greg and Dennis, thank you so much for being on today. It was wonderful getting to know you and the work that you're doing in your business and changing the lives of organizations and individuals. So love hearing all of that, and it's just really a pleasure having you on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate you. You too.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.